All right, so new year, new us, right?
Yeah.
Let's ditch those resolutions that we all forget about by February and actually dive into making things happen.
I'm with you there.
You sent over this great article, Desires and Goals, Turning Aspirations into Achievements for 2025.
Yes.
And it's really got me thinking about how we can turn those big dreams into, like, actually concrete plans.
Yeah, I love this article.
You ready to unpack it a bit?
Absolutely. It's definitely something we can all relate to, wanting positive change, especially this time of year.
Oh, totally.
But this article, I think, goes beyond just that kind of, like, wishful thinking.
Yeah.
It actually delves into the science behind goal setting and gives us a really solid framework for success.
I love how it starts off talking about the difference between desires and goals because it's so easy to get stuck in that I want to be healthier mindset.
Right.
But how do we actually get there?
Exactly. And that's where goal specificity comes in.
Yep.
The article does a great job of explaining that. And it's so crucial. Like there's this research by Locke and Latham back in 2002, and it showed that having clear goals actually improves performance because it gives our brains a clear target. It's like a roadmap.
I see, yeah.
It takes the guesswork out of making decisions so we can just focus our energy on taking action.
So instead of just wishing to be healthier, we need to actually set like specific fitness goals, right?
Exactly.
But then how do we make sure those goals are actually doable? And this is the big one for me. How do we know they're actually relevant to our lives?
Right. Well, the article brings up this SMART model as a framework for creating those effective goals. And I mean, a lot of people have heard of this acronym before.
Right.
But what I think is really interesting and maybe often overlooked is that R, that relevance piece. It's about making sure your goals align with your personal values and purpose. And I think that's really key for staying motivated in the long run.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap of setting goals based on what other people expect or just pressures that I feel,
Oh, for sure.
And then I just lose steam like halfway through.
It happens to the best of us. But when our goals are truly rooted in our core values, that's when we tap into that intrinsic motivation. We're not just checking things off a list. We're driven by that deeper sense of purpose, and that's what really fuels that commitment.
So let's say, like, my big desire is to finally write that novel I've always dreamed about.
Okay, yeah.
How would I go about using that SMART model to transform that dream into a plan, actually considering my values and what matters most to me?
Well, let's break it down. So instead of just this vague idea of write a novel, I need to get specific. What kind of novel are we talking about? What genre? How many words are you aiming for? That's the S, the specific part.
Okay, so let's say my goal is to write a 75,000-word historical fiction novel set in 18th century France.
Ooh!
That already feels a lot more tangible,
Exactly. Now we're getting somewhere. Let's make it measurable.
Okay.
So maybe you set a goal to write 500 words every day. Or maybe finish one chapter each week. That way you can actually track your progress, which could be really motivating.
Right, and I guess that ties into the time bound then. So to give myself that deadline and that sense of, I got to get this done, I could say, okay, I want a finished first draft by December 2025.
I love it. You're getting it. Now, for the A, achievable. Think about it. Can you really write 75,000 words in a year, given your schedule and everything else you've got going on? It's about finding that balance, challenging yourself, but keeping it realistic.
That's where I have to be honest with myself, right? Like maybe I need to adjust that deadline or that word count based on how much time I can actually dedicate to writing.
Exactly. It's about setting yourself up for success, not setting yourself up for burnout.
Totally.
Now, here comes the good part, the R, relevance. And this is where you connect that goal to your deeper why. Why is writing this novel so important to you? Are you trying to share a certain message? Are you passionate about this particular period in history? Or is it just, the pure joy of writing itself?
It's so funny you say that because for me, I think it really is about bringing history to life through stories.
I love that.
And connecting with readers in a way that makes them feel something, That's what really gets me fired up to write.
There you have it. That's your fuel. By incorporating that sense of purpose, your goal becomes more than just another item on your to-do list.
Yeah.
It becomes an expression of what you value, a source of that intrinsic motivation we were talking about.
So we took my vague desire to write a novel and turned it into a SMART goal, which is amazing. But how do we actually bridge the gap between that plan and making it happen?
Well, that's where those actionable steps come in. The article lays out a really clear roadmap. for taking those well-crafted goals and turning them into, tangible actions.
Okay, let's dive into those steps. I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear how they can move from, just dreaming about things to actually accomplishing them.
So the first step the article talks about is this thing they call initial reflection.
Okay.
And it's all about really understanding, like, the deeper why behind our desires,
Oh, I see.
going beyond that surface level and asking ourselves, what does success actually look like to me?
Oh, I love that. It's like taking that pause before you actually jump in, just to make sure you're headed in the right direction.
Right.
It reminds me of that saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
Exactly. And it's not just about the destination, it's also about making sure the journey itself is fulfilling
Right.
by aligning those goals with our values.
So in the case of my writing goal, I would ask myself, what kind of impact do I want this novel to have? What emotions do I want to evoke in the reader?
Yeah, good questions.
Like, what does it actually mean for me to be a successful author?
That's it. It's about defining success on your own terms.
Yeah.
Not based on what society tells you or what other people expect of you. It's about what matters to you.
Okay, so once we've done all that soul searching, the article says the next step is goal formulation.
Yes.
This is where we take those clarified desires and use the SMART model to turn them into concrete, achievable goals.
Exactly. And the article gives a really good example of this.
Oh, okay.
It talks about how to turn that vague desire to read more
Right. We all
into a specific goal of reading one book per month throughout 2025.
I love that. That's so good.
Yeah, right.
It's so practical and you can actually measure it. It
Yeah.
has that time frame.
And it's achievable.
Yeah.
Right. You're not saying you're going to read a book every day,
Yeah, exactly.
which for some people might be great, but for others, that's just not realistic.
And that leads us to the next step, which is breaking it down.
Yes.
The article really stresses how important it is to create these smaller, manageable steps so you don't get overwhelmed by the enormity of the goal.
I think this is where a lot of people get tripped up.
Mm-hmm.
They set this big, ambitious goal,
Oh, for sure.
and they just get overwhelmed by the sheer size of it.
It's like staring up at a mountain,
Yeah.
thinking, how am I ever going to climb that?
And the key is to break it down into those smaller steps,
Hmm.
like base camps along the way.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, it makes it feel less daunting.
Okay, so instead of freaking out about those 75,000 words I need to write, I could set a goal of writing, I don't know, like 5 chapters a month.
Right.
Or maybe even just setting a daily word count.
Exactly. And each time you hit one of those smaller milestones,
Right.
it builds momentum and confidence. It propels you forward on that journey.
It feels good to check things off your list, even if it's a small thing.
Totally. And speaking of things that feel good,
Yes.
we've got to talk about monitor and adjust, which is the next step.
Okay.
This one is all about embracing flexibility.
Ooh, I like that.
It's not about rigidly sticking to the plan. It's about realizing that life happens.
Right.
And sometimes you need to adjust course.
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of people give up, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You're like, oh, I'm not perfectly on track, so I've failed.
Yeah, they throw in the towel.
And really, it's about being honest with yourself.
Totally.
Like, is this working? Do I need to tweak something? Maybe I need to adjust my timeline.
You got it.
It's treating it like a journey,
Exactly.
There might be detours, you might hit some traffic, you might even discover some cool scenic routes you didn't know about before.
I love that.
So it's about enjoying the ride and making those course corrections as needed.
And celebrating those small victories along the way. Which brings us to the final step.
Oh, tell me more.
Celebrate achievements. The article really emphasizes this idea of acknowledging our progress, giving ourselves credit for all the effort we're putting in.
Oh, this is so important.
It is. I think we often forget to do this.
Right, we're so focused on what's next
Exactly.
that we don't stop and say, hey, you've come a long way. Give yourself a pat on the back.
And those celebrations don't have to be big, fancy things.
Right.
It could be as simple as just taking a moment to savor a small accomplishment,
I like it.
or sharing your progress with a friend, or just acknowledging to yourself, I did that.
So we've talked about these 5 steps.
Yes.
Initial reflection, goal formulation, breaking it down, monitor and adjust, and celebrate achievements.
That's our roadmap.
It's like a whole toolkit for turning dreams into reality.
I love that.
But there's one more piece that I'm really excited to unpack,
Oh, okay.
and that's the whole idea of purpose. So we've talked about all these practical steps, setting SMART goals, breaking things down, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's a great foundation.
But for me, it always comes back to that deeper why, like
Right.
what really drives us to achieve these goals. And this article, it really gets into the whole idea of purpose.
It's such a powerful concept, isn't it?
Mm.
Because you can have the best plan in the world,
Oh,
but
totally.
if you don't have that fire in your belly, that deep-seated motivation,
Right.
it's easy to lose steam.
Exactly. And this article, it talks about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Yes.
And it actually cites some research by Ryan and Deci, which really highlights the difference.
Oh, that's a classic study. It basically shows that while things like rewards or recognition, those external motivators.
Right, like getting a trophy or something.
Exactly. Those can work,
Oh,
but
wow.
they usually only work in the short term.
I see.
It's that intrinsic motivation, that drive that comes from within.
Yeah.
That's what really fuels that long-term commitment.
So let's say, for example, I'm trying to learn to play guitar.
Okay.
If I'm only practicing because, I want to impress someone or win a talent show,
Right.
that's coming from a different place, and if I'm truly passionate about music.
Absolutely.
Hmm?
In the first scenario, you're motivated by external factors.
Yeah.
The recognition, the applause.
Right.
But in the second scenario, it's the joy of making music, the satisfaction of mastering a new skill.
It's the love of the game.
Exactly. And I bet those are the guitar players who are still strumming away years later.
Oh, for sure, because it's not about the trophy, it's about the music.
And the article makes a similar point about fitness goals. Someone who's only exercising to lose weight for a specific event, like a wedding.
Right.
They might struggle to keep that going once the wedding is over.
Yeah, because the motivation is gone.
But someone who genuinely enjoys moving their body, who values their health,
Yeah.
and feels good when they exercise,
Right.
they're more likely to make it a sustainable part of their life.
So it's about connecting those goals to something bigger than ourselves, something that aligns with our values and gives us that sense of purpose.
Exactly. And I think that's what this article really drives home.
Yeah.
It's not just about checking things off a list. It's about living a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
And that brings us to a question that the article poses that I think is worth pondering. If adapting and adjusting is key to achieving our goals, how can we stay flexible and committed even when faced with, challenges and setbacks?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's all about mindset, I think.
Oh, tell me more.
It's about embracing that growth mindset, seeing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow,
Okay.
and realizing that setbacks are not failures, they're just feedback.
Yeah, it's about not giving up when things get tough.
Exactly. And it's also about being kind to ourselves throughout the process,
I like that.
recognizing that it's okay to adjust our course, to change our timelines,
Right.
and to celebrate every step we take towards our goals.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into turning aspirations into achievements, I think the key takeaway is this. It's not just about setting goals, it's about finding that deeper purpose that fuels our commitment
Yes.
and helps us navigate all the ups and downs along the way.
It's about embracing the journey, not just focusing on the destination.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.
This was fun.
I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and ready to take action in this new year.
I hope so too.
Thanks for listening, everyone.